Okay, you're live now.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Norwich City Council Licensing Subcommittee, Wednesday, 13th of January, 2021. We're here today to hear application for a review of a premises licence for 3 Diamonds, 82 Upper St Giles Street, Norwich. We'll start the meeting with any apologies, please. Everybody, and I believe there are none. And declarations of interest. Wednesday, 13th of January. There are none. So we move on to item 3, which is Licensing Act 2003, application for review of a premises licence, 3 Diamonds, 82 Upper St Giles Street, Norwich, NR2 1LT. We'll hear that report in a moment, and then we'll move on to item 4, which is exclusion of the public. And I'd like to cover this first because we're going to see some footage of the incident that occurred last year, the reason we need to consider the exclusion of the public is because the footage identifies individuals and potentially their family members and the personal address of the licence holder, and therefore it would not be in the public interest, I believe, to show that video on the public stream. Do other members agree with that assessment? Okay, thank you. Appendix F, which is in the pack that members of the committee have, similarly has an exempt item, and I'd like to propose that again we maintain exemption of that item for the same reasons. I'll hand over to Sarah Moss, who is our legal advisor, to cover anything that I haven't included, please. Sarah.
Yes, you've covered under item 3, so there are individuals there and family and a personal address, and just to also flag that the committee decided that they wouldn't want to wish to compromise any action which had been taken or would be taken in connection with prevention, investigation or prosecution of crime. Similarly, for the exempt materials, having reference to the categories of exempt information under Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, particular categories fall within that. The relevant sections are 1, information related to any individual, 2, information which is likely to reveal the identity of an individual, and number 7, which is information relating to any action taken or to be taken in connection with the prevention, investigation or prosecution of crime. And it's submitted that those paragraphs that I've just mentioned would be relevant in deciding that the information in Appendix F would be exempt.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for covering the item I forgot, which was on another page that I've written.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. So we'll return to item 3, then the main item, and come back to items 4 and 5 in a separate area later. So first of all, we have Tiffany Bentley, who is our licensing officer, to present the report, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. So the purpose of the report: members are asked, in accordance with the delegation of licensing functions contained in the Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy, Licensing Act 2003, to consider an application by Richard Divey, Public Protection Officer for Norwich City Council, to review the premises licence in respect of 3 Diamonds, 82 Upper St Giles Street in Norwich. The recommendation is members determine the review application in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, the guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, and Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy. So, moving to the main body of the report. The Act provides a mechanism by which, following the grant of a premises licence, a responsible authority or any other person may ask the licensing authority to review the licence because of matters arising at the premises in connection with any of the 4 licensing objectives, those being the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The licensing authority must advertise the review by displaying a notice at, on, or near the site of the premises to which the application relates and at the main offices of the licensing authority. Notification of an application is also displayed on the Norwich City Council website. The Act provides the licensing authority with a range of powers that it may exercise on determining a review, where it considers them appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. However, the licensing authority may decide that no action is necessary if it finds that the review does not require it to take any steps appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. Where a licensing authority considers that action under its statutory powers is necessary, it may take any of the following steps. To modify the conditions of the premises licence, which includes adding new conditions or any alteration or omission of an existing condition, for example, by reducing the hours of opening or by requiring door supervisors at particular times. To exclude a licensable activity from the scope of the licence. To remove the designated premises supervisor, for example, because they consider the problems are the result of poor management. To suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, and finally, revocation of the licence. It should be noted that modifications of conditions and exclusions of licensable activities may be imposed either permanently or for a temporary period of up to 3 months. The following parties have a right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court if they are aggrieved by the licensing authority's decision: the applicant for the review, the holder of the premises licence, and any other person who made relevant representations to the application. So coming to the application itself, it was received, application to review the premises licence in respect of 3 Diamonds at 82 Upper St Giles Street in Norwich was received from Richard Divey, Public Protection Officer for Norwich City Council. A copy of that application is attached as Appendix A to the report. The grounds for review fall under the licensing objective of the prevention of crime and disorder. Copy of the existing licence and operating schedule is attached to Appendix B to the report. The current premises licence holder is Doris Foods Limited, and the designated premises supervisor was Shuman Chowdhury, but he made a request to be removed as the designated premises supervisor on the 13th of November 2020. A copy of that is attached as Appendix C. Now, if I may, that last sentence of paragraph 10, the situation has evolved since the actual publishing or writing and publishing of the report. The designated premises supervisor, an application has been received, and that's been varied to Mr. Zaffalari, which took effect from the 6th of January 2021. So there's just that lag between the application coming into effect and the document being published. The other alteration since the review was made, the review application, was that there was a minor variation submitted, which included a new plan to reflect the layout, which is the document that is within this current licence in the report, and agreement of conditions with the police. That came into effect on the 21st of December 2020. Just referring back to that plan so it's page 22 of the report pack. Unfortunately, the situation is that because it's in black and white, it is not massively clear to see the, bear with me, 25 of the report pack. It's not massively clear to see the exact licensed area, as it's lost the colour. But if members can look at the actual application, it's the furthest 2 parts of the building. The area is marked as restaurant, so it's kind of both ends of that plan has a bar and an area with tables and chairs laid out. So both the left and right hand side, furthest extremes of that, are the licensed area. Mr. Zaffalari can confirm that exactly, but it's just a clarification that those two extremes of the diagram are the licensed area.
Excuse me, Tiffany, would you mind just confirming, so the extent of the licensable area, that hasn't changed in terms of size, location, dimension? It's exactly the same as the previous plan that was submitted with the original license application?
The original, I believe, my understanding is that there was a bar that has now been reflected in the new and current plan, which wasn't on the original license application.
Okay.
But the public protection officer can pick that up, or the police can describe exactly what was different.
Okay, but the extent of it hadn't changed, or its location, that sort of stuff.
In terms of like the actual part of the building, yeah, it was the same areas, just some structural changes to the layout.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so sorry, just returning to the report again. So I'm now returning to paragraph 11, relevant representations. The responses from the responsible authorities are as follows. The police letter and statement received, copy attached as Appendix F to the report. Public protection is the applicant in this review, and then no representations were received from fire, planning, the Child Protection Committee, training standards, or the Primary Care Trust. Attached to Appendix D are the elements of the City Council's local licensing policy which are considered to have a bearing upon the application. And Appendix E are the elements of the national guidance issued by the Secretary of State that are considered to have a bearing upon the application. The summary is in determining the application with a view to promoting the licensing objectives, the subcommittee must give appropriate weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote the licensing objectives, i.e. the prevention of crime disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The representations, including supporting information presented by all the parties, the guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, the Council's own statement of licensing policy. The subcommittee must take such of the following steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. To modify the conditions of the premises licence, which includes adding new conditions or any alteration or omission of an existing condition. To exclude a licensable activity from the scope of the licence. To suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, and to revoke the licence. The final is to remove the designated premises supervisor if they consider the problems are a result of poor management. Subcommittee is asked to note should not carry out any of the steps set out in paragraph 15 above because it considers it desirable to do so, must actually be appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives. And that concludes the report. You're on mute, Chair, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I knew that would happen. Thank you. In reference to the report on page 4, item number 2, there's reference there to notifications. Can you confirm that the authority has met its obligations with those notifications, please?
Yes, we have. It becomes the authority's responsibility to affix the notice and check it. So yes, we can confirm that it has been in place for the required time. Okay,
thank you very much. I'm going to ask Sarah to give us some advice in a moment. There was some legislation and guidance that was in place at the time of this event when it occurred. Sarah, please could you describe what the legislation and guidance was at the time?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There were two relevant pieces of legislation in force on the 10th of November. The first one was the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions England number 4 regulations 2020, which came into force on the 5th of November 2020. I will just read out the relevant section. So section 15 of this legislation states that a person responsible for carrying on a restricted business or providing a restricted service must close any premises or part of the premises in which food or drink are provided for consumption on those premises and cease providing food or drink for consumption on its premises. There are some provisions in section 17 allowing for delivery and takeaway. The second piece of legislation in force on the 10th of November was the Health Protection Coronavirus Wearing of Face Coverings in a Relevant Place England Regulations 2020, which were in force on the 24th of July 2020. Again, reading out the relevant section. Section 3 states that no person may, without reasonable excuse, enter or remain within a relevant place without wearing a face covering. A relevant place being defined in Schedule 1 as a restaurant, bar or public house. And the legislation was amended in September to include employees who are also required to wear a face covering within the relevant place. There was also guidance in place, which was released by the government on the 11th of May 2020 and updated regularly throughout the year, including on the 9th of November 2020. The guidance is called Keeping Workers and Customers Safe in COVID-19 in Restaurants, Pubs, Bars and Takeaway Services, to which the licence holder would have had access as it was on the government website, and it's acknowledged that this is guidance and not actual legislation. The other legislation which might be relevant is the Licensing Act 2003, under which Section 136 states that a person commits an offence if he carries on or attempts to carry on a licensable activity on or from any premises otherwise and under and in accordance with an authorisation, or he knowingly allows licensable activity to be so carried on. It's submitted that that may be relevant in terms of the plan, in that the premises was not operating or was not laid out in accordance with the plan originally submitted with the application and under which the authorisation was granted. And I believe that's everything for the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's important information for the committee to consider. Okay, right, we'll do some introductions now. My name is Ian Stuteley, the chair for today's meeting. Other members of the committee are Councillor Nanette Youssef and Councillor Jacob Huntley. We heard from Tiffany Bentley from the licensing department, and we also have Richard Spinks, the police officer on the day, and Richard Divey, who brought this review to us, and Michelle Bartram from the police licensing team. So we also have the licence holder, Olga Zeffalari, and two of his representatives, and they are June Clark and Tony Clark. June, could you describe your role, please? And Tony.
Yes, I'm a licensing consultant. I've been one since 2003, I think, 2003, a long time. I'm semi-retired, and my son has taken over my business, which is Tony. Sorry about the dog.
Yeah, no worries. It happens. Okay, so your role today is representing Mr. Zeffalari, is that correct?
Yeah, because Tony's only had 12 months experience, I still do most of the hearings or reviews. So I've been brought in on an advisory and obviously to deal with this matter today.
Okay, thank you. If you wouldn't mind turning your microphone off now, that would be helpful. Okay, thank you. So next we'll hear from Richard Divey, and then from Richard Spinks and Michelle Bartram. So Richard, can you start by describing the events and your version of those events, please?
It's the right page. Yeah, thank you, members, for considering this review application. As you will be able to see, this review of a premises licence is as a result of a visit made by myself and PC Spinks to the premises on the 10th of November 2020 at approximately 12:50. The visit was as a result of reports of persons being seen congregating in the outside area to the rear of the restaurant. We had an indication from the designated premises supervisor that he did not wish to be responsible for sales of alcohol at this address, although that paperwork had not been followed through to the full extent, so there was no resignation at that time. The restaurant did appear from the front to be closed, as was required by the regulations at the time, and as we've heard, that was the second lockdown, which started on the 5th of November. However, on approaching the rear of the premises, there were persons smoking outside, and upon entry, the service of food and alcohol was clearly taking place. This was an offence under the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions England No. 4 Regulations 2020. Issues over the DPS for the premises have since been resolved, and as has the plan of the licensed area. Norwich City Council have not received any further complaints about the premises, and visits checking compliance with the closure under regulations have found no further breach. There has, however, been few occasions that the premises have been able to operate legally in the meantime. The premises agreed to improve a condition for the provision of CCTV, and I believe that is already installed, and that CCTV will be supplied to police and/or licensing officers upon request. However, I believe that the committee needs to consider the revocation of the premises licence for the following reasons. If you can refer to page 28, item number 20.
Yep. Thank you.
The objective being the prevention of crime and disorder. And then more specifically to point 20.2. And in there it says that it is the responsibility of the licence holder to become a key partner in achieving this objective. In this case, the licence holder and the management have failed to meet this objective. And the objective under point 20.3 on the next page, number 29, in that it is to include keeping illegal activity like drug taking and dealing, offensive weapons and sales of contraband or stolen goods away from their premises. It's plain that this is not a perfect fit for this item point, but it was a deliberate attempt that I believe should be seen as the same as being in the same order of seriousness. Also at point 20.4, that is to do with the effective and responsible management of the premises. I believe that the allowing of the premises to be used at this time was also in breach of that point. If I can refer to Appendix E, page 39. This is to do with the when a premises should be have their license revoked. At 11.27, there's several occasions where they say that how and when a license should be considered for revocation. In this situation, it says that actually at 11.28 is, yes, sorry, this offence doesn't appear in this list of serious criminal activity, but I believe that it should be considered as being on the same level of seriousness, being that it puts the population of this country at risk of serious harm by failing to control the virus. Therefore, as at point 11.28, the licensing authority should consider the revocation of the licence even in the first instance.
Okay, thank you. Does that conclude your assessment for now?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Richard Divey, including the licence holder or their representatives?
I have a question.
Okay, is that June Clark?
Yes, it is.
Yep, please go ahead.
Okay. Richard, good afternoon. Do you have any evidence that licensable activity was actually taking place?
Yes, I do, and that is shown in the video that that there was alcohol on the tables that appeared to have been provided for consumption by the customers, and also the display of alcohol was playing in the premises.
Were you aware that there was a DPS in situ at the time?
The DPS, although he was listed as being in charge of the sale of alcohol, had made an attempt before to resign. He had made a mistake on that paperwork in his resignation, therefore that resignation had not taken place.
Have you spoken to Mr. Gavin Tempest about this? Because I have this morning.
Yes, I've spoken to Gavin Tempest, and I also spoke to Shuman Chowdhury, who was the DPS. And it was clear that although at the time of this instance, the DPS did have an agreement to operate as the DPS, he since has resigned his position.
But do you agree that at the time, on the 10th, there was authorisation in place?
I agree that there was an authorisation in place, but I do not agree that Shuman Chowdhury authorised those sales of alcohol. He was not aware that the premises was opening in breach of the regulations.
Okay, right. Are you? I mean, I'm sure you are aware of exactly what is a licensable activity.
Yes.
You know, can you name explain what it constitutes? A licensable activity. What does it constitute?
A licensable activity is any of the activities that are listed under the license for a premises, and in this occasion, I would say the sales of alcohol.
Okay, that's the crucial word I was looking for: the sale of alcohol. Okay, yeah. So you agree that a licensable activity requires a transaction to be made or an exchange of money against alcohol. Is that correct? Do you agree?
It does, yes.
Okay, so I'll ask again, do you have any evidence that any money was exchanged?
We have no evidence that money was exchanged, but the premises was set up for the sale of alcohol with a person specifically behind the bar of the premises at the time of the offence. And it would be perverse to suggest that that person was employed to make the premises look pretty. They were there to sell alcohol, I believe.
Do you agree under the coronavirus regulations that customers or people are not allowed to approach a bar? Therefore, it requires somebody to be behind there.
At that time, it was not allowed, and no one was allowed in the premises at all to be while it was operating.
but this was a private function, therefore no licensable activities were ever taking place. Do you agree with that?
If this was a licensable function, I would suggest that the members of the public that were dining at the time, who all appeared to be on separate tables and not engaging completely with each other, would have not instantly left the premises on our arrival.
Did you ask who the people were that attended that day?
No.
So you don't know who they were?
No, we don't.
Okay, right, that's fine. So you never asked anybody what they were doing there that day?
No.
No, okay. That's
okay,
fine.
Can I just interject there? Mr. Divey, why did you not speak to any members of the public that day? Is that, in fact, PC Spinks can comment if he wishes to as well?
Yeah, the first point of order was that we asked for who was in charge of the premises, and as you'll be able to see when you view the video, within seconds people are leaving by all exits, even exits saying no exit this way. Okay, thank you. Right, any further questions for Richard Divey from June Clark or anybody else?
I'm okay at the moment, unless.
Okay, thank you. You'll have other opportunities to come back later. I'll turn now to PC Spinks, who was also with Richard on the day. And can I ask you to, first of all, confirm Richard Divey's explanation of events and add anything that you'd like to, please.
Good afternoon, PC Richard Spinks, licensing team for Norfolk Constabulary. Yes, I confirm Richard's account of the day, and as you'll see from the body cam footage, I go in and I like to find somebody in charge to talk to first before I start talking to anybody else. And as soon as I ask who's in charge, straight away everyone's up and leaving by all the exits they can, including some that say staff only. It took some time to locate the person who is meant to be in charge, and by then virtually all the people had gone. But yes, please watch the footage and then you'll see exactly what happened that afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Yes, members of this call will have an opportunity to watch that footage a little later. So Ms. Clark, do you have any questions specifically for PC Spinks?
No. The questions I have, I've already asked, and I'm sure that if PC Spinks had anything different, I'm sure he would have just said. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to direct anything to PC Spinks at this stage?
Yes, may I, Chair? Sarah Moss.
Yeah.
Committee may find it helpful to know how long PC Spinks and Mr. Divey were at the premises in total.
Thank you.
Oh, I would say probably 20 minutes.
20 minutes. And I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch. Did you say that by the time you'd left the premises, everybody had left who had previously been there at the premises?
Yes, apart from Mr. Zavaleri and I believe his brother, I think was also left behind afterwards.
Thank you. Okay,
and the member of staff, did that member of staff also leave?
The person behind the bar, yes, she vacated very shortly while I was finding Mr. Olgert.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll have further opportunities to speak to PC Spinks a little bit later. Now I'll turn to Michelle Bartram. Do you have anything to add, please?
Thank you, Chair. As you've heard, the premises was found to be opening when all the pubs and restaurants were told to close during the second national lockdown back in November of last year. And this visit took place as a result of the intelligence received to City Council that the venue had been open. As you've heard, during this visit on the 10th of November, activity was taking place at the rear of the premises. The window blinds were all closed, meaning activity was less visible from the outside. And at the front of the premises, that was all closed as well. You've also heard that as there were 3 males congregating outside smoking, the officers walk in and everybody else leaves quickly, like they shouldn't have been there. In addition to not being allowed to open, it was also found that there were no COVID measures in place. Customers were in small groups together. There was no social distancing of the tables, and no members of public or staff were wearing any face coverings. The body cam footage will be really useful for you all, because you'll be able to see exactly what was seen at the time, but also the response from the operator. And PC Spinks is here to answer any further questions that you might have. This also shows that there were customers consuming the alcohol, and large quantity of alcohol at the back of the bar, and also some in the upright chiller. Now, I know that there's been a discrepancy about the DPS situation. My understanding is that Mr. Chowdhury initially agreed to remain on the licence during the transitional change of ownership, which was back, I believe, November of 2019. And that never got changed. During a follow-up visit, I think there was also concerns about the capacity of the premises, the number of people that were allowed on the premises in terms of fire safety. He wasn't aware of the capacity limits, and they also asked to see a fire risk assessment, which wasn't provided either. As you are aware, there has been changes to the layout of the premises, meaning more activity at the back, and the new fire risk assessment would need to reflect that. You will also notice on the body cam footage, Mr. Zafalari mentions that he's new, but he has actually held the premises licence in his company name since November of 2019. And I appreciate he might be inexperienced in knowing licensing legislation, you know, about the DPS, whether that the situation with that, but it was public knowledge. It was a national awareness that pubs and restaurants were not allowed to be open at this time, and it is really disappointing for us to have to review a premises licence due to a blatant breach of lockdown restrictions, especially because so many operators in the county have done the responsible thing to close despite the financial impact this has caused on them. And those that hold a premises licence have been in even more fear because of concern about losing their premises licence due to not complying with the restrictions or not having a sufficient number of COVID measures in place. Following that incident that occurred in November, the operator has made changes. He's nominated himself as DPS, so he himself is now responsible for all the sales of the alcohol. In addition, he's also applied for the minor variation to the licence to incorporate the back and the bar included in that. Now, just before the hearing, we've looked at the plan again, and we're slightly concerned that that is not 100% accurate. We can sort of discuss that later. When the application was submitted, it gave mention to CCTV, so I took the opportunity to request that further conditions were added to the premises licence. This is to state that CCTV will record for 28 days and be available to police or licensing authority officers and on request, and that there will always be one member of staff who is able to use that footage. And that's when it's open to the public. These conditions, I believe, have now been agreed and are now attached to the premises licence. So this will assist with deterring any crime and assisting police with criminal investigations, and also it'll give us and the council the ability to obtain any CCTV footage on request should we get any further reports. The manager, Mr. Zafalari, also applied for a number of temporary event notices over the Christmas and New Year period. The first one was a late 10, which gives short notice. So I initially objected to this temporary event notice. However, I then realised it would be more beneficial for us and for him to be able to operate under these 10s, so we can then assess his ability to manage the premises and see how he would get on with COVID measures. We had some enforcement visits planned to this to check compliance, but unfortunately, due to further lockdown restrictions over the Christmas and New Year, the operator could not open. Visits were carried out, one in particular on New Year's Eve to check, and the venue was completely closed and empty of staff and customers. In addition, an application to nominate himself as DPS was received on the 22nd of December. This application was not objected to by police. I felt that it would make things clearer for us to have him down on the licence, as he has the day-to-day running of the premises, and I didn't want to risk having another absent DPS listed. I also knew that we had the review hearing where we could reconsider this decision if needed. I feel it is only fair to him to raise that apart from this breach, there have been no calls of disorder to the police or crimes linked to the premises since the operator took over back in November 2019. And it could be argued from them that it would be a fine which he has paid, and a review of the licence could be 2 bites of a cherry. However, this breach is a serious criminal offence which risks the health of staff, customers and the wider community. And although the fine for the offence has been paid and changes have been made to the licence, there is the element of trust and the issue of trust as to whether the committee feel the management can be trusted in order to comply with the law, in particular coronavirus restrictions. Some would argue that that breach has contributed to rising cases and resulted in yet a further lockdown. The management of evidence that they are capable of breaching legislation, albeit on one occasion and not persistently, but they have undermined the licensing objective, which is the prevention of crime and disorder. I am really interested to hear the reasons for his opening and for reassurance that he will not do this again. If the committee is satisfied that the issues relating to the specific premises licence have been addressed, and he shows remorse and he can guarantee that it will not happen again, then I understand that the licence could remain. At the time of the application of the review, the DPS was absent, the plan was incorrect, and there were no CCTV conditions attached. I'm pleased that these issues have been addressed under the licence. So in summary, the police support that this review is happening and that we are looking at the licence as a result of the offence. And this gives the committee the opportunity to consider whether the fine and the changes to the licence are sufficient, or if they believe that further action should be taken. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I've got a bit of feedback on my mic. I wonder if anybody else has their mics on. It appears not. Mr. Zaffaleri, it's fine for you to have yours on at this stage. That's cleared now. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Michelle, in particular, Ms. Clark?
No, I have no questions.
Right. Okay. So now I'll ask members of the committee, Councillor Youssef or Councillor Huntley, if they have any questions for Michelle or PC Spinks or Richard.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I may, I've got a question for Sarah Moss, which is regarding what we've heard from Tiffany and Richard. As outlined in the report on point 8 on page 5, grounds for review are the licensing objective concerning crime and disorder. Can weight similarly be placed on the other licensing objective regarding public safety?
Thank you. Yes, it is noted that the police have identified the licensing objective of prevention of crime and disorder as the ground for review. In my legal opinion, I would think that it would be reasonable for the committee to be able to consider the licensing objective of public safety as being kind of part of the licensing objective for crime and disorder, simply because the purpose of the COVID legislation would have been the protection of the public, which obviously is a very important matter. So I do believe they kind of go hand in hand, and I do believe it would be reasonable to give some weighting to the public safety licensing objective as well.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Huntley?
That does indeed. Thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you, Chair.
As a follow-up to that, Richard Divey has referred to page 39 of report 11.27 and 11.28, So Sarah, the implication here is that this offence should be added to that list there as part of the use of the licensed premises. Do you agree with that assessment?
Just 1 second, I'm just reading. Did you say 11.27?
11.27. Richard Divey was indicating that this particular offence isn't specifically noted in that list, but should be added perhaps by definition of the emergency legislation that was put in place. Therefore, I was just asking for clarification of whether you agree with that. Is that what you were asking, Richard? Is that what you were stating?
Yes. In my opinion, the offence was serious enough for this review hearing to consider whether they wish to revoke the licence in the first instance.
Okay. I mean, it isn't obviously included within that. And I would say simply that is Mr. Divey's opinion, but that isn't something I could perhaps make a comment on right at this moment.
Okay, thank you. That's why I asked. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I believe Councillor Youssef was going to return to the point about the plan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I recognise in the report it mentions that both the plan and the DPS were not kept up to date in the paperwork. I recognise that that's now been updated, but I have some quite serious concerns about why that wasn't kept up to date. And if I could just turn briefly to Sarah to explain why it's so important for this to be kept up to date, I'd really value hearing the response of either the licensee or his agent as to why that wasn't the case.
Thank you. Sarah.
So the DPS is responsible for the day-to-day management of the premises, and they are the first point of contact if the local authority or the police wish to know immediately who is in charge. It's really important that obviously that everything's kept up to date, so that if something does happen, can just get in touch with the DPS as soon as possible. And obviously, the seriousness of it is reflected within the Licensing Act 2003, that it does stipulate that changes need to be notified and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. And just for the benefit of the public, DPS is the designated premises supervisor. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? And then I think we ought to ask Mr. Zeffalari to speak, and then we can ask him some questions as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any indications or hearing any. So welcome again, Mr. Zeffalari. Thank you for coming. Can you talk to us about the event that happened on the 10th of November last year and give us your version, please?
Excuse me. As the agent, I prepared a statement ready for it. So
okay, that's fine. Yes. Apologies if you'd like to proceed.
And ask Mr. Zeffalari any questions afterwards.
Yep. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So first of all, may I just make a note of point 10 of the review of the report? At the beginning, it says at the end, the last few words say there is no DPS at the premises. Well, there actually is a DPS at the premises. There's a DPS registered, although that his presence wasn't there, and his presence wasn't there because the premises was not open. So, but that's a misunderstanding. There was no DPS at the premises. There was a DPS registered on the license at the time on the 10th of November. So just to clarify another point before I go into the statement, the only change that had been made to the plans, hence that's why we submitted a minor variation, was to move a bar from one side of the room to the other. The whole of the room was licensed. and it was approximately about 7 meters. So you literally took it from one corner and put it to the other. The bar is the same size. The bar was not fixed to the floor. And as I say, the room was already licensed. And I'll explain about that room later on in my presentation. Mr.
Okay, thank you. Before we proceed, we'll actually, I think we'll get those items tidied up. So the reference on page 5, there is no designated premises supervisor at the premises. Item number 10 there. Tiffany, can you confirm that is the case, Sarah, as well?
Yep. I mean, the issue is at the time of writing the report, Mr. Chowdhury had removed himself from the position of being DPS. So obviously you can only write the document that is true at the point of actual, kind of fingers on keyboard. So at the point that was written, he had removed himself as DPS, so there was no DPS in place.
Okay. And
that's separate to the time of the visit and separate to the situation now where there is the situation has been resolved by Mr. Zafalari going on as DPS. But clearly at that time of writing, there wasn't one specified on the licence.
Thank you. I think that's clarified that very well. I'm seeing an indication from Richard Divey, please.
Yeah, sorry. Tiff has covered the first point of it, and just a clarification about a couple of things over plans. We do often find that bars move, but in this instance there was 2 issues. There was a bar that moved from one side of the rear room to the other, and a bar was created in the front restaurant that wasn't there before on the previous plan. But in reality, we understand that those issues often make no difference to the licensing objectives. It is just a point to clarify in this case.
Okay, thank you. So, so you can confirm that there was the bar moved as described by Jean Clark, but there was another bar additionally to that. Jean, can you respond to that? And then we'll move on to your statement, please.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any changes to the front restaurant. I wasn't informed of any at all. I'm just asking Tony, can he have a check out the plans whilst I'm going through my presentation, and maybe we could come back to that in a few moments. Is that all right?
Yes, we can. That seems sensible. Yeah, please proceed with your statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Zafalari took on the lease in October 2019. The landlord for the property is actually the council, Norwich Council. And I understand this is whom he pays his rent to. The premises licence was transferred to Durrus Foods Limited by a local licensing consultant, Mr. Gavin Tempest. And there was a reason why it was only transferred and not changed the DPS at the time. A copy of the premises licence, together with the plans, were hand-delivered to Three Diamonds Restaurant upon approval. And the licence was, the original licence was actually approved in 2005, and there were no conditions attached to the licence at all. So obviously it was not a high-risk premises. Mr. Olgert actually installed the CCTV as part himself as part of the refurbishment. And so obviously if it's been open since 2005, it's only closed in 2019. So that's 14 years trouble-free. An agreement was made at the time of the transfer or the sale with Mr. Chowdhury to authorise any sales of alcohol if, I emphasise the word if, they ever did open until before his new manager and his new chef arrived. So Mr. Zafalari took on the premises, okay? When he took the premises on, he organised a new manager. The new manager was local. and the chef was coming from Greece. But he said, hang on, we've got lots of work to do here. We'll let you know when we're ready. A subsequent application was going to be submitted prior to the opening of the restaurant when they completed all the decoration, and arrangements were in place for his new manager to be the new DPS because he held a personal license, and the new chef was coming from Greece. A few weeks later, the applicant himself started redecorating the interior of the property with the help of his brother. So there was just the two of them. The decorating took much longer than expected, and the premises was near ready in February 2020. You can obviously tell that this was financially draining on Olgert, because he'd had the premises, he's paying the rent, he's not getting any income whatsoever, he'd not been opened, but they were nearly ready. They were still working on the front restaurant. Initially, Mr. Safalari did not recognise the rear room, identified by Area B on the plans as a dining area, because it appeared to be used as a storeroom. The old bar had been lifted and positioned in the corner with tables, chairs and boxes loaded on top. So when he walked in there, the previous people, Mr. Chowdhury, who used to own it, did not use the back room. He only used the front, and it was just a storeroom. Whilst he was waiting for his new manager and chef to arrive, Mr. Safalari decided to open the rear dining area as a small dining area, mainly for family and friends, whilst they completed the rest of the decorating and the front dining area. The front dining area was intended for the customers and they were going to use as the main area. When the COVID-19 outbreak happened, the new manager, he left him. He told him, I'm not coming. I'm going to work with my brother in another restaurant. And the chef decided not to travel to the UK. So all the plans just went flop. Everything just went on the floor. Mr. Olgert had only opened a week or two when he received an informal visit from PC Spinks and Michelle Bartram, the police licensing officer. At this time, works were still undergoing at the front of the premises. So there was only the back part of it open, and it wasn't really open officially. It was just open to friends and family at the time. This was February 2020. The front part of the restaurant is identified as Area A on the plans and is the main area for customer dining. Since October, I call him Mr. Olgert because it's much easier to say, has never opened. He's never opened. He's never traded from the front of the premises. Never. Since October 19, he's never ever took one penny for anything in the front of the restaurant, simply because he doesn't have a chef. Since October 19, he's only ever opened the rear dining area to the family and friends and not to the general public. This area has been assessed with an occupancy through the recent fire risk assessment of 40 seated persons. The front restaurant has a capacity of 50 seated people. Due to the circumstances of COVID-19, it has not been possible to open at all as a fully trading business, simply because he's got no chef. On Tuesday, the 23rd of November, the reason why there was a gathering in the restaurant, and I must emphasize it was a private gathering, Mr. Olgert was asked by a family friend, could they hold a gathering in his restaurant? An uncle had died in the hometown, so Mr. Olgert agreed to have a few people for food and drinks. Mr. Olgert believed that there was only going to be about 10 people there. Apparently, there was a few more turned up. Mr. Olgert had informed the gentleman that he could not sell alcohol, but he did tell them they could bring their own. Only a couple of them did. Most of them drank soft drinks or coffee. Mr. Olgert was not hiding anything, as his CCTV was in operation at the time, and the police could have easily asked to see it. He could have asked to see the till. There was a till in place. There was no sales on the till. The till was there. He wasn't hiding anything. The 21 cases of Budweiser mentioned in the statement from PC Spinks was old stock, and it was going out of date. Mr. Olgart had agreed, a friend who has a restaurant, to buy it from him at a reduced rate, and the cases were due to be collected by this gentleman. I've got some summaries here, but I'd just like to go on a little bit further. I need to emphasise that no sales of alcohol have ever taken place on the 10th of November. Mr. Olgart has probably only opened up his restaurant with a combination of maybe 14 days since October 2019. He has never opened the restaurant during the lockdowns, apart from this one incident where it was a private gathering, and he thought it was going to be okay because he wasn't going to do any licensable activities. They were just using his premises for the kitchen to gather for the people, to commemorate the uncle that had died. And the uncle was the uncle of the gentleman who had the baby. It was his uncle, and the people that were there were not customers, because customers have to pay, right? They're not customers. These were people, they were friends and family only. And and when people are sat down, there is no requirement to wear a mask. When they're sat down to eat, there's no requirement. Yeah, okay. He holds his hands up and says, yes, I should have pursued it, and I should have insisted that they wore masks if they stood up from the table. I should have insisted it. But consider that the door and the tables are only 10 feet maximum, and he's also monitored his family and friends since that day, and nobody has as much as caught a cold. So he's not spreading anything around. The gathering was a private event. There was no customers, no money exchanged hands, no licensable activities ever took place. The premises was not open to the public and not trading as a business. Mr. Olgart has fully cooperated with the police and the council. He's done everything that has been asked about. Since the 10th of November, I'm calling him Mr. Olgart, has gained his personal license via an online course. He's submitted a minor variation to change the layout of Area B. He's agreed to conditions. He's agreed with Michelle Bartram. Conditions were added to the premises license for the requirements of CCTV, which he's already got, which he paid for himself, that Mr. Olgart had already installed. He's obtained a fire safety inspection to include firefighting equipment. There was a DPS registered at the premises at the time, and authorization was given. And we have sent a copy, or I have sent a copy of that authorization from Mr. Chowdhury to Tiffany this afternoon, just as the meeting was started. I did send it this morning, but for some reason it's just not gone. But sadly, this authorization was never used because it was hardly ever used. Now, Mr. Olgart has been in touch with Mr. Chowdhury all through this time, and there was never a need to push to change a DPS because A, they weren't open, and B, Mr. Chowdhury said, well, if you're just doing a one-off, it doesn't matter. And he didn't really know what to do. He doesn't know how long he's going to be there. He doesn't know how long. He's recently just sold his car to pay the rent. He's got no income whatsoever. He's had no funding from the government, and he's now crowdfunded by his friends and family to keep the restaurant open, hopefully that the COVID will die down. But Richard Divvy and PC Spinks could have easily verified that there was a DPS in place, and they did make a phone call, and yet both appeared to be vague about whether there was a DPS there in their statements. And there was one there. Mr. Olga has no staff. He's no staff. He hasn't got any staff. He's not trading. He cannot trade. He's no chef, and he is unable to employ one due to the current COVID-19 situation. The current premises licence is a Durrus Food Limited, and the DPS was Mr. Shuman Chowdhury, but he made a request to be removed on the 13th of November. A copy of this. Sorry, I'm just reading something else. Okay. All the people that were present on the 10th were family and friends helping out because of the bereavement of the gentleman's uncle. Under the current regulations, Mr. Olga cannot force anyone to wear a face covering. If somebody says, I'm exempt, he's not even allowed to ask, why are you not exempt? He can't do it. And it's also illegal to ask someone for details about their exemption under the Equality Act 2010. And a business or a person can claim compensation up to £9,000 if they say, I want to know why you're not wearing a mask. I want, so it's a very difficult situation for someone to be in when you've got people coming in saying, I'm exempt, I'm exempt, I'm exempt. And you can't ask them why you're exempt. You just can't do it. So Mr. Olga has suffered financially during this lockdown period. He's had no funding, no assistance from any government source. He went to get the funding like everybody else, and he was told he's not entitled to it. And as I say, he's recently had to sell his car to pay the rent. He was issued with a penalty notice, and he did pay £1,000 to the council. He should have only paid £500, but he listened to the advice of a solicitor who advised him that only a court can issue a fine, and he should appeal it. But he didn't want any more trouble. He doesn't want any trouble, and he just decided to pay. By the time he went to pay it, it was too late. Then he had to pay £1,000, and that's what he's just paid. So Mr. Olga, he's paid for his punishment of the gathering. It's a one-off gathering. Under the Licensing Act, everyone is fully aware that we cannot cross over legislation or regulations. The coronavirus is covered by its own legislation. And they're actually, under Section 11, there is an exemption to a gathering. It says, to commemorate the event following a person's death, you can have a gathering, but it must consist of no more than 15 persons. Unfortunately, this one's 16. And the gathering takes place at a premises other than a private dwelling. And the gathering organiser and manager takes the required precautions in relations to the gathering. So yes, so this is probably why the solicitor advised him that, he should really take this further. But he doesn't want any trouble. He just wants to open his restaurant. Unfortunately, it's really, really, really bad timing. Just a few other points that I'd like to, that I've identified, if I can just go back to them again, if I can find them. That alcohol, that in the statements that we've got from Richard and from PC Spinks and Michelle, they've all said that alcohol was being sold. Okay, alcohol was not being sold. That could have been easily proven at the time of the event by looking at the cameras and by looking at the till. Nothing. There was no money there. The lady was behind the bar because people are not supposed to approach a bar. It says alcohol was displayed for sale in a criminal manner. I don't know what that means, a criminal manner. How else can you display alcohol apart from putting it on a shelf? And it wasn't displayed in a criminal manner because the license was actually okay at the time. It was valid. There was a DPS registered. The guy might not have been there, but there was a DPS registered. Therefore, that license was valid. So you can display alcohol on that premises. And it's not definitely not in a criminal manner. They found 16 customers consuming alcohol. No, there wasn't. Apparently, according to one of the statements, it says at least one table had alcohol, just one. Okay. Out of 16 customers, you put 4 on a table, that's 4 tables. There was no social distancing measures in place. Well, it's from what I can gather, if people sit back to back, you don't need to be 2 meters apart if you sit back to back. And no one was wearing face coverings. That's because everyone was seated, and you don't wear a face covering when you're seated. Alcohol was being sold and on display at the time of the visit. Well, it wasn't, because it wasn't being sold, and it could have been easily verified that day, but nobody did. The current premises, it is unclear if the current DPS is Mr. Chowdhury. Well, it was clear because a telephone call was made to the office at the time, and the office confirmed the answer was negative. What that means, I don't know, but there was a DPS on the 10th, and no licensable activities were taking place as it was a private gathering, albeit an offence was committed under the corona regulations, and the penalty was issued and it was paid for. Mr. Olga Safari is very, very sorry for what's happened. If he'd have known that this was going to cause so much trouble, he would not have done it. It's cost him an absolute fortune to do this. He cannot open his premises. He hasn't opened his premises at all. He's not opened. He doesn't open at all. And even New Year's Eve, he's not there. He's not there. The biggest night of the year when you went for income and revenue is New Year's Eve. He's not even open. So Norwich City Council had received information that he resigned, meaning that the sales and display of alcohol are unauthorised. But if it's not open, then it doesn't matter what's displayed on the shelves because nobody's going in there. He's agreed to conditions which Michelle Bartram put forward. No problem at all. To put the CCTV for 28 days, a fire risk assessment, it's been done, an amended plan, it's been done, and COVID measures to be complied with. Well, you know, if he ever opens again, he will deal with the COVID measures, but it's just that he just wasn't opening. There was no customers in there at all, and hardly any has been in there.
Miss Clark, could you start winding up now, please? I'm concerned that some of the points you're making are repetitive.
Okay. He did use the temporary notices, and obviously Michelle said it was a chance of him to prove that he was going to do everything, and he did. He just didn't even open. Yeah, a lot of it is repeated because I'm trying to go over the points that were made under the statements, and some of them are sort of not correct. Yes, he did do that one night. He's that one day. He's extremely sorry, very, very sorry for what he's done. He's paid his penalty. He's never opened again. He doesn't want to open again until everything's in place. How long he's going to be there, we don't know, because we don't know how long it's going to last, the COVID. You know, there's talk that there's 2 million people been vaccinated. So there's probably about another 60 million to go before it's safe to go out again. So, you know, he's very, very sorry. But I think probably, considering it's just one with family and friends, I think it's a little excessive and onerous to ask for a revocation of the license. It's very onerous. And I can't really see how this can, I mean, if he was opening 10 nights a week and no corona, you know, no regulations in place, no precautions, nothing, then I would say it's a blatant abuse. But it was just a one-off with 16 people.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. I think you've made your points very very clearly. You'll have another opportunity to speak if you feel that you've missed anything. First of all, just in response to some of the questions you've asked in your statement of the circumstances, I'll ask Michelle or Richard Divey to come back. I noticed that PC Spinks has left the conversation.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's had to rush off and do something. So he sends his apologies and for not being able to continue with this. I've got a couple of things. I don't know if Richard wants to go first or if you're happy for me.
You can go first if you wish.
Yeah. So why didn't Mr. Zafalari mention that it was a funeral gathering at the time?
Well, it's the same. I mean, I've been doing this job since 2003, and I deal with a lot of foreign people. And the first thing that happens when somebody in a uniform walks in the room is everyone runs away. And it's an automatic reaction. He was terrified. And that's the answer. He was just terrified. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to say. He was just terrified. And people just go dumbstruck.
Yeah. Have you got any sort of written communication between them to say that it was a pre-planned event, a function? Any sort of text messages or anything?
I think you'd have to ask. You'd have to ask the gentleman himself for that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's do that now. Mr. Zafalari, do you have any communications, or did you have any communications of a written type between you and the person who was organising the funeral?
I'm not sure if I've got any text of it, but we normally met outside the coffee shop, which is on Durham Road. We normally get a takeaway coffee. That's where we kind of little small Albanian community. I'm from Albania, and I've only have got 10-15 friends around here in Norwich. We're friends. We kind of related to each other. That was where we talk about it.
Okay, thank you. So you're confirming that
sure if I've got any text. I have to look through my messages, but I'm not 100% sure if I've got any text, because I'm 100% sure we met 1 day or 2 days before. Yeah, it was the day when my uncle died in Albania, and that was the day when we met outside the coffee shop. We normally, when it's a lockdown, we normally get a takeaway coffee from there. So that's where we talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, back to you.
Yeah. Were you concerned about holding an event at your venue?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Sorry,
were you worried about holding the event in any way? About potentially having police turn up or causing any problems in terms of COVID? Did you have any measures in place? Did you think that you needed to keep people apart or anything like that in terms of COVID? What you were going to do?
Because it was only 10 people, we did turn up like on this kind of events, or I don't know how to call it. You can't tell the people why you came, so they came on kind of respect on that day into the shop, into the area B, and it was more than 10 people, so you can't even tell them. So I thought I was gonna tell them to come around mine, but I thought the restaurant, the area B, is a bit bigger than my living room, so I thought it would be better in there. So
yeah, what time was it meant to finish? Did they say how long it was going to be going on for, or it was just a gathering, or what?
That was going to finish about an hour and a half. Okay. It's about 1:30.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Richard, do you have any further questions?
Yeah, it has thrown up various questions, and I'll try and go through them as best I can. We're saying that there were 16 people inside, but as will be seen from the video, there were also 3 people waiting outside, smoking. The reason for the visit is relevant in this case. It was noise complaints of regular gatherings of large crowds of people outside the premises, smoking and then returning into the premises. So therefore a visit was deemed to be necessary to see what was happening. When we entered the premises, as you'll be able to see from the video, I'd pay specific notice to the way that they're operating. If this was a single gathering of people, I would have expected all the food to be served together and them to be eating individually. My sort of interpretation of what was happening was that the food was, some people had finished their food and were sitting around talking, chatting, playing cards. Other people had just been served their meal. It had just arrived on their table and appeared that they'd not even started. When we walked through to the kitchen areas, the further meals were being taken place. I didn't take particular notice of whether the till was in use, but I seem to believe that it was certainly turned on. I believe it was a green light in the till. As you get a display with the numbers, but as I say, that may become clearer if you look at the till in the video. I'm not sure at this time. Although there was no one wearing masks, and we were saying that is this a breach of the coronavirus of people standing around, then I would have at least expected the owners to be wearing masks while they were serving food and drink. Certainly people can be seen in the video standing around talking, not just seated. When we come to the trading issue, obviously, if you're not using your license, then you can't have alcohol on display. You should take the alcohol off display if you're not using your license. It's clearly seen from the video that the alcohol is on display, and the legislation is steered in the way that if you are open for a business purpose and you're displaying alcohol, the interpretation of that is that alcohol is being displayed for the purpose of sale.
Okay, can I just interrupt you there, and just for clarification, all other premises that have closed at the moment,
yes,
are they obliged to cover their display cabinets where alcohol is present in order to not display it?
Yep. If they were open in a trading purpose, i.e. in this situation, what we're being told is happening is there's a funeral. If that funeral is taking place whereby the people attending that funeral being supplied through food and goods completely for free, then it may well be that there is no use of the license. Therefore, those goods should not be on display, because the display of those is offering those for sale.
Okay, thank you. Right, so just to sort of clear up the original question there, items that are displayed in pubs and restaurants around the country now, are they being displayed within the law?
If that premises is closed, then they won't have members of the public entering as a public house. If those premises are being used for private parties, then they would expect to have to make it clear that those items are not for sale at that time by covering them, or for, making signage available to say we're not selling at this time.
Okay, and another question I had before I ask you to continue is we talked about this being a private event. Are there any, and also that numbers were restricted to 15 at the time for this type of event. Are there any circumstances where this type of event would be permitted on the premises of this type at the time?
At the time, if this was a gathering for a funeral, I am not exactly sure of the legislation at the time, so I wouldn't actually want to quote what it was.
Okay, I'll ask Sarah that question then, please, and then I'll ask you to continue. Sarah.
Yes, I would need to check the legislation myself. Perhaps it's something we could come back to when I've just had a chance to look through.
Yes, please. Yeah, okay. Sorry to interrupt you, Richard. Please continue.
Yeah, forgetting where I was at now. Yeah, so the food is free. The alcohol issue, although alcohol was only noted at one table, that was only because the alcohol was a clear spirit, which was only detectable by the fact that I picked up one of the glasses from the table and smelt whether it was spirit in the glass or not. And it was a clear spirit with a very strong alcoholic smell. There was other glasses of the same top on other tables with a similar substance, which could have been water or could have been spirits in them, but no attempt was made to check that. The purpose of the visit was to check whether the venue is serving alcohol and whether they're complying with COVID regulations. The fact that there's spirits in there and alcohol on display, we believed we'd done enough to show that, give evidence that the premises was operating in a normal manner that a venue of this type would.
Okay, thank you. So you attended in response to members of the public making complaints or representations?
Yes, members of the public making complaints of that they were being disturbed in their residential premises by gatherings outside the venue.
So, and those complaints, were they received via the website form? Or
they were received by various methods, but they came through to me on our Civica processes.
Yeah, okay. And can you confirm that they were associated with multiple days, so days prior to the 10th of November?
I believe so, but I would have to check that to confirm.
Is it possible to confirm that while we're still?
I will try, but it may take me a little while.
Okay, because I think that's quite important. I believe the restrictions came into force on the 5th or 6th of November. 5th, I think.
November.
And this was the 10th. Okay. Any other questions from members or other people on the call before I ask a couple of questions? Councillor Huntley.
If I could, thank you, Chair. It's been stated that Mr. Zappalari was monitoring the people who were there. Given that we know that this is an asymptomatic, or coronavirus is asymptomatic sometimes, can I ask what this monitoring was?
I have an indication from Jean Clark, please.
Oh, hi. Yeah. To answer the question of the monitoring has been after the 10th of November. Because obviously it's a small community and they're all talking to each other. Are you okay? Everyone all right? Anybody ill? No. So it's the monitoring has been after the 10th of November, not monitoring on the day.
So the monitoring has just been asking each other whether they feel okay.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And everybody's been
can be asymptomatic.
Well, it's been what? How long now? It's 1, 2, 3 months. Nothing. So, I think if there was anything hanging around that day, I think they would have caught it well within.
But they wouldn't know if it's asymptomatic.
Well, I had a recent trip to England and I caught the flu while I was over there. And everyone was going, "You've got COVID, stay in the bedroom." I said, "I haven't got COVID." "You have got COVID." Anyway, to travel back, I had to get a test done. And I had the test in the middle of a blazing flu and it was negative. So, I don't know.
Thank you. I think we've established that this particular event on the 10th of November wasn't what they call a super spreader event, but I think Councillor Huntley's observation there is valid, that there may have been a small, potentially a small outbreak of non-symptomatic COVID. However, I think what we're considering here is the risk to the public rather than what actually happened. Councillor Joseph, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to ask Mr. Olgert. I understand that it can be very difficult to enforce others wearing masks in and around premises, but why was he not wearing a mask whilst this took place?
Thank you. Mr. Zafalari.
I was sitting, I just went to the kitchen. I normally wear mask, but I've got another problem because I had to deal with a brain tumor for about 5 years, and I've been treating with a chemotherapy for 5 years. And when I wear a mask, I really got a problem. I get so paranoid.
Okay.
So that was one of the...
Thank you for that. Okay, I've got Jean Clark again, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask a question to Richard Divey. Did you not advise the client at the time, or Olga, to remove the alcohol? Did you say anything to him on the day that you thought it was an offence because you wasn't sure if there was a DPS there, and so to remove the alcohol? Did you advise him on the day?
By the time that we got through to that discussion, all the customers had left, and he was obviously closing. But it was, as you'll be able to see from the video, discussed with him that he was displaying that alcohol for sale.
Okay, thank you.
While I'm on the, I have just looked at the complaints, and we received complaints on both both days previous to the visit.
Okay, and
from two separate people.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zafalari, you said that you usually wear a mask. In what circumstances do you usually wear a mask, given that you're not open?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Sorry, my English is not that great. So
okay, no problem. You said that you normally wear a mask. I just wondered what circumstances do you normally wear that mask, given that you were not open for business at the time?
I normally wear a mask when I'm in public places, but
okay, thank you.
Shops, right. But I sometimes when I feel paranoid of wearing masks, I normally tell to the doorman, for example, on Tesco or supermarket or something. I said I can't because I can't really breathe. Okay. And my illness was about 1.5 years ago, so that was the reason.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I understand. Right. Okay. I've got another question, unless anybody else has something. I'll return to you in a moment, Ms. Clark. Right. So the footage. You say that footage was being taken at the time, and had the police asked to see that footage, you would have made it available. Why didn't you volunteer that footage on the day if it would have exonerated you?
To be honest, like I said, as I am a new business and I didn't really know what to do, because as you know, I come from a different country. I don't know loads of rules, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Loads of things. I did say to the Mr. Richard, I need the help. Just tell me what to do. I put my hands up and I asked him, tell me what to do. I'll do everything how should have to be.
Okay, thank you. Jean Clark, you indicated a few minutes ago.
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down. So no, that was just one question.
Okay. Right, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions currently? Michelle?
I take it he hasn't still got the CCTV. recorded.
Do you still have a copy from that day?
To be honest, I didn't make any copy. I thought they're gonna ask me or something, but
Okay.
It's nearly 3 months, so I don't think that's been saved or something.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, I've got Tony Clark, please.
Hello, hi. I'd just like to make a point about the plans. I was the gentleman that made amendments to the plans for the front bar, and I don't think that issue was finally cleared up. So the reason why it was never amended up until this point was simply, as my mum pointed out, at the time, Olga was still finishing off the refurbishments for the front, and there was always going to be an amendment made to the plans, but it wasn't until that was completed. And it just so it transpired this way that that your intervention took place before the plans were to be amended anyway, if you know what I mean. Olga had already asked me to do those plans and adjust them, but the final amendments were being done at the same time, if you know what I mean, to the back bar as well as the front bar. So that's hopefully that clears that issue up.
Okay, thank you. I think there's I think to a certain extent the plans are an additional perhaps side issue to the main main consideration, but I thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Zafalari, do you have access to your typing in the chats on the chat screen?
Yes.
You do. Okay, thank you. Can you just in there for the benefit of those on the call only and not the public, therefore, just put in the name of the person in the restaurant who was buying the Budweiser from you, please. Okay, thank you. And the staff member, the woman who was behind the bar, please don't name her. Can you just say what relationship she has to you? Is she a staff member or a family member?
She is my girlfriend.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are there any more questions? If not, I believe it's probably time to move to the see the video. However, I'd like to propose that we have a short break because we've had some of us have had quite a long time sitting in these chairs. So I propose we have a short break, 5 minutes, and then we'll return at just before 3:20 when we can view the video footage. So those that are looking after the tech, does that mean we need to stop the live stream now? Okay, if you'd like to do that, and for the benefit of members of the public, we'll be back later with our determination. Thank you. Okay, is the live stream stopped?
I've stopped the live stream now.
Okay, thank you. Right, so let's have, I've done it again with my video. Let's have 5 minutes and then